Welcome back to Driven by Dreams. Today, I'm honored to have Ian join us. As the founder and CEO of UNINCORPORATED, the nation's #1 higher education agency, Ian has helped top institutions grow student engagement, launch new programs, and build impactful brand identities. Beyond that, he's a dedicated educator and mentor, sharing his expertise at Cal State LA and Northeastern University. Let's dive in. Hi, Ian. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks, Tanishka. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for coming. Well, I'm excited to hear more about your journey. Could you start by sharing a bit about yourself?
Yeah. My name is Ian Evenstar, and I own a branding and marketing agency that is focused in the EdTech industry. So, if those of your listeners know the crossover between where higher education and technology intersect, that's where our agency operates. My background, I came from a university background, so I was a university professor in LA. I also worked for the USC Design Studio, so that was the in-house branding, marketing, and design team for USC while I was there. And yeah, now we're really exploring not only how to empower universities, colleges, programs best support students, but now with this new AI technology that we're implementing here at the agency, we're actually able to now enable students also to learn faster, learn the material, in a more accessible way, go deeper in their learning, and ultimately help prepare them for that transition that happens between college and their career life.
So, what motivated you to become an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think entrepreneurship in general is maybe a genetic code or a slice of DNA that I think are all born with to a degree. It's a classic nature versus nurture, right? What were you born with versus what are you going to ultimately kind of learn, or what parts of yourself will change in your journey and your life experiences. And so for me, the moment where I realized I was an entrepreneur was right almost at the peak of my career in many ways. So I came from a very poor family. I didn't have the means perhaps as some of my fellow classmates. And I'll never forget the day where, and I like to share this story a lot because it kind of paints the history of where I've been and why education is so important to me, and it'll get to the question you asked too. But I was waking up in the early morning, every morning, to walk to the bus stop. This was on the East Coast in Pennsylvania, and because my family didn't really have the means to have a nice wardrobe and the amenities maybe of a warm meal every night, I was in the process of taking my jeans off every night and washing them in the sink with like dish soap or whatever I could find, and then I would lay them outside to dry overnight so that they'd be ready in the morning when I would go to school. And this one particular morning, it was right, where we get our first frost in between the seasons. And I looked out and my jeans, they were like icicles, like frozen from the frost. And I realized that not only was I going to have to put on a pair of wet jeans, but these were going to be ice cold. And every step of the way, walking to the bus stop that morning, reminded me, in excruciating detail almost, that I wasn't coming from the same place maybe as other students. And I wasn't mad about it, and I'm definitely not mad about it now. But in that moment, it made me realize that education and going to school and getting really good grades and creating opportunities for myself that maybe I wasn't born with necessarily, that was going to be a means of ascension, right? Or that was going to be my way to get from my current state to perhaps an ideal state. So I ended up going to college. I got into college, which was great, started my career. And when I went back to USC and I became the design director there, I remember I had the perfect salary, the perfect benefit plan, I was, in charge of some really fantastic work. So we were overseeing things like their homecoming campaign, and their commencement, and some of their Good Neighbors community outreach campaign. So it was really exciting, very fulfilling work. And I showed up to work one day and I wasn't happy. And it was like this lingering thing that I had in the back of my mind, like, why am I not satisfied, right? Like, you've gone from that poor kid walking to the bus stop in ice cold jeans to a successful white collar knowledge worker of the 21st century, right? Whatever. Why aren't you happy? And I realized that my journey was such that I needed to provide for myself, for survival. And then at a certain point, I had a family, and I was able to provide for them. And I just felt this emptiness, like, what if I could provide for even more? What if I could create even more opportunities? And I think that ultimately that's what entrepreneurs dream about, is how to create as much growth and opportunity and prosperity in the world around us. And it was in that moment I realized that the reason I wasn't happy in my perfect job was because I really wanted to get out and see how many jobs I could create, how much learning and knowledge and how many lives could I touch individually, as they walked into this, fantasy of a agency one day that I was imagining. So probably in that moment where I felt unfulfilled and really needed to answer that question, why, and do some soul searching, that's when I knew.
Wow, that's amazing. How far you've come since then.
It's been a lot of ups and downs, as I'm sure a lot of the entrepreneurs you talk to, right? Sometimes it's survival, and it feels like it vacillates from feast and famine sometimes, especially in the early days.
Yeah, that's what my next question was about, actually. So, what were some of the biggest challenges you faced in the early stages of your business, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, I think early on, you, as a business owner, an entrepreneur, founder, right, you're wearing every single hat. You're the accounting department, you're the HR department, you're the new business department, right? You're the actual specialist talent that needs to execute the work. And yeah, I think the biggest challenge, honestly, for me was, how do I scale the delivery of service, or maybe an easier way of saying that, how do I scale the amount of work that my agency or my business is capable of producing, which means also in business terms, how do I increase the amount of potential revenue? And if I'm the one that is attached to doing the work, as well as the one that's supposed to be kind of designing or working on the business from a strategy and vision standpoint, how do you step out enough in order to scale? And so I think the biggest challenge has been finding talent that you can afford when you probably don't have enough money even to pay yourself what you're worth. And then at the same time, how do you train that talent to the point where they can start to now take some of the knowledge that's in your head as the entrepreneur and operate freely? So that transition of going from an owner-operator to working more as the visionary and building a team, that was probably the biggest challenge. Building a team that could train, learn, and deliver top quality product or service, so that the business could grow and scale.
So, how did you go about doing that, building your team?
Yeah, well, I guess basically try to sweeten the deal as best as you can when it comes to recruitment. What that means is, maybe you can't offer a competitive salary for a senior graphic designer, right? Or maybe even an entry-level web developer, because you just need, at that point, like I just needed someone to maintain content updates, right, on an existing client. They'd be emailing me, hey, can you update this page, this page? It's like, okay, I need to get to that to a web developer just for content management. So even a entry-level content web developer, content manager, web talent, they know what their competitive rate is. And especially in a gig economy where you can, if you know what you're doing online, like you can make hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? Like we know that from the gig economy stats themselves. But I had to find a way to compensate the talent early on at a lower rate, a rate that I could afford in order to keep the lights on, and try to find other ways, other benefits, maybe non-monetary ways, to give them value as a professional. So that included mentoring them. That included them giving them really clear opportunities that were beyond maybe what they would have, and reminding them of those opportunities, and how that could potentially help them with their career as they worked up, maybe into a senior position, or maybe even into an art director position or senior developer position. So I found ways, creative ways, to compensate them so that they felt valued, but they also saw the value in continuing from a professional standpoint. And I run off of, my agency is based off of a value-driven performance, which basically means if we're not providing value to our client, if we're not providing value to the agency, and if we're not creating value in ourselves every day, and that's like professional value, then it's not a good fit, right? So that value-driven mindset was helpful early on to pay talent what I could afford, and then during that process, also finding ways to build systems and operations, or like documentation, so that they could then start to manage other people under them, right? That was sort of the 1-2 domino effect. And that was done maybe for 2 or 3 key positions early on, right? As you're going for a single owner operator. I was in my garage with a laptop and a screen press and a camera. Like, those were my tools, and my office was my garage, right? How many great businesses like Google, for example, born in the garage. But when I went from my garage to employee 1, 2, and 3, I had to leverage my own network, pay those teammates, those team members, those first employees, lower than what they could find on the open market, and then incentivize them with intangibles or non-monetary things like additional time off. We had a thing called Wonderful Wednesday, where we would always do either like a learning event or some type of team bonding event, but find ways to compensate them that I could afford, and then continue to illustrate the value that they were gaining, and really try to mentor them so that they felt that they were on a path to mastery. And then the final piece of that is, as they began to serve more of the clients, I was able to then turn my attention to documentation and training so that they could then start to manage and mentor others. And that was the moment where I think we went from probably 3 employees to 25 employees, like almost in 1 year's time.
That's great. Your agency is about marketing. So what areas of marketing should a company that is starting their business focus on, and how can aspiring entrepreneurs reach their ideal customer profiles?
Yeah, it's a great question. 2-part question there, right? So we'll take the first half of that, which is, what type of marketing is the best marketing? Well, honestly, have you heard that quote from Jay-Z? He says, "I'm not a businessman, I'm the business man." Which basically means when you start as an entrepreneur, it's you. People are buying you. So the best marketing you can do for yourself as a startup entrepreneur is market yourself. And that means getting out to cocktail hour. That means calling your friends. That means hitting your people up on LinkedIn. That means making the uncomfortable email blast that goes out to everybody that says, "Hey, I just started. Are you looking for a website?" Right? Like, being humble in many ways. But marketing yourself is absolutely critical. And there's a lot of ways to market yourself just outside of the digital world, right? So I'm thinking of the ways that you show up on LinkedIn and what that profile looks like. I'm thinking about the ways that you market yourself and your business on Instagram. But that's kind of all sort of digital cold market in a way. But going and meeting people, taking lunches, shaking hands to hands, those are the ways I think that true marketing, early stages, really helps. Because when you can have a conversation with someone, then it's a lot easier to help articulate the value of how your company or service could help them versus just like an email blast or, hoping to catch someone on social media or spamming people on LinkedIn. Like, who likes that anymore, right? Like, I don't even go to my LinkedIn inbox anymore because of all the spam that's in there. So best marketing, I would say, is the personal branding piece and the personal marketing. And then probably beyond that, it really comes down to the type of product you have. Because if it's a consumer good, for example, then I would say Meta is still a really good play from a marketing channel. But if you're a B2B, then something like a conference where you could demonstrate your thought leadership and have a trade booth and engage conversations, right? Like, that's a lot more effective for more B2B customers. In terms of who we serve, so like if we're helping a university, let's take, I don't know, Stanford Law, right? So if we're trying to find the next, and Stanford, by the way, they don't have any trouble recruiting, but let's assume they had one new program that they were launching within the Stanford Law College. They would come to us and say, hey, can you market this program to a certain demographic that we're looking to reach? And my question back to them would be, what makes your program different? Why should these students choose your program over another program? And that's the part of marketing that I think some people miss, is the branding piece. That's the positioning piece or the messaging piece. It's sort of all wrapped up in branding, who you are, your identity. It's a brand identity. So with marketing to our clients and to our agency personnel, we're oftentimes asking them, even before we talk about channel and what's the best marketing, right? That's the question. We talk more about, well, who are you and what makes you different? And with that, we can start to, and who are you trying to reach? And so that's the second part of your question, right? The ideal customer profile. And who are you trying to reach? And then from that conversation, we can start to build what's called an empathy map. And an empathy map is just basically saying, well, if your ideal customer profile, we'll just go with the Stanford Law example, is a recent high school graduate from maybe underserved communities residing in these states, right? So we're looking for like a West Coast campaign. And now that I have that geographic and demographic profile, age, location, income, marital status, right? All of that, gender, ethnicity. Then we start to go into the psychographics. And the psychographics is the empathy mapping. And you need to ask yourself, okay, if I were that person, it's called human-centered design or human-centered marketing. You put yourself in the center of that human's mind. And so if I were that human, that young high school student that matches this profile geographically and demographically, what would I be worried about? What's keeping me up at night? What am I trying to accomplish? Where do I live? What's my home environment like? How difficult is it even for me to fill out an application? Once an application's filled out, what am I worrying about then, right? Like, this is now empathy mapping sort of along the journey, the buyer's journey, because there's top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel. I don't want to get into a marketing class here, but to answer the second part of your question, which is how do you identify your ideal profile? You have to start with your demographic information, which includes geography, ethnicity, right? All the personal details. And then you have to expand that holistically to think about their human condition and the empathy. And at that point, you can actually really start to think about what channel is best, what's the right message, what's our SEO strategy look like? Because if, for example, if one of the things we learn is this young lady who just graduated high school and is a potential Stanford Law graduate in the future, one of the things we can, and we find out that advanced placement testing maybe is a concern of hers. So she didn't score very well on her advanced testing. So she might be searching advanced placement testing for Stanford Law undergraduates. That's her empathy. That's what she wants to know because that's what she's worried about. So now all of a sudden that empathy statement turns into a keyword phrase for the SEO. And now going back to my client, best way to market your program is to write a bunch of articles and do a bunch of content on social that talk to low scores on advanced placement. And now all of a sudden you're touching the person exactly where they are on their journey, in their heart, not just in their head. And you have to do both, right? You have to kind of aim for the heart, but then appeal to their logic center. So I say aim for the heart, but maybe hit them in the head, or reverse, aim for the head, but hit them in the heart. And that's because the empathy piece is so important when you build out that ideal customer profile.
Well, thank you so much for that advice. So, as an entrepreneur, how have you evolved over time, and what are some valuable lessons that you've learned along the way?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot, too many certainly to share. The one thing that I would say has changed in me is, I think, confidence for me. So I was a creative professional. I graduated college. I went to a traditional advertising agency. They weren't doing any web. So they had clients like, I'm going to date myself here, but like Halle Berry, Shaquille O'Neal, Kobe Bryant, Will Smith. So a lot of entertainment clients. And they were only doing like print advertising and radio ads and things like that, say, to promote their new movies. And I was this young kid out of college, and I was really excited about this thing called the internet, which was this is early 2000s, so this is like right around the whole dot-com bubble and ultimate burst. And I basically went and I pitched my boss. I said, hey, can we start building these things called websites and then packaging them or selling those to our clients? So I was really afraid to talk to my boss, to deliver on the statement of work. You know, once we had someone, like once I was working directly with Halle Berry, like how to display confidence. So I think the big thing for me that has really changed is just confidence in my ability to deliver value. And as a creative professional, that confidence changed from being able to deliver value on creative to now being able to deliver value as a CEO and founder with no business training, no masters of business administration, no MBA, no EMBA, none of that. I never took a finance class, right? I was good in math, but other than that, I was really kind of street smarts in what I knew about marketing, ad creative, and design. And I got really interested in behavioral psychology, which sort of helped me fake it till I make it kind of thing. But because I was good at positioning myself as an expert, even though maybe I didn't have the experience yet. So the big thing that's changed for me is just gaining confidence, and that voice in your head where you're like always doubting yourself. It was so loud. I think that voice is getting quieter. At least I hope that voice is getting quieter. And maybe that's, again, another trait of an entrepreneur, right? We never feel like we've done enough, and we never feel like we've grown enough, and we never feel maybe that we're, I don't know, where we should be or good enough. And this is also, I think, general sentiment, right? Like, how many young kids do I talk to in my classes who still think like that they're never going to amount to anything, right? Or that they're never going to be good enough because of, I don't know, some limitation that they've believed their whole life. So self-confidence for sure has been a big thing that's changed for me. Being able to, and that's come with confidence, and that's come with wins, and that's come with mistakes, and that's come with everything under the sun. But in terms of like, a key lesson and a key takeaway, I'll share one that's at least practical, very practical. So as your audience may or may not know, there's these entrepreneur groups out there, YPO, there's Vistage, there is EO, which is Entrepreneurs Organization, happens to be the largest entrepreneurs organization internationally. And in order to get into these organizations, which are basically peer groups for entrepreneurs to help build their business and address like key challenges that they have at different growth stages, just to get into these exclusive peer groups, you have to have a revenue qualifier. So the big lesson learned for me was how to accelerate my growth, not just by myself, but reaching out to one of these organizations and looking for support. If I had done that early on, I would have been put into the Entrepreneur Organization Accelerator Program, and I would have hit my first $1 million in revenue much faster than what it took me to do. So I would say a big key learning for me in this kind of retrospect looking back has been, when you're starting out, don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to go to the watering holes. And EO is amazing because that organization that I'm a part of now, and a proud board member, that organization wants to empower young entrepreneurs, right? So here I am, mid-30s, like not knowing where to go and who to turn to, when there was a resource right there. If I had just, instead of focusing on how I'm going to make my next dollar, where are my mentors? Where are the groups that actually want to help people like me? And how can I get support? Because I clearly can't do it alone. And the other big lesson I would say that's kind of sort of related to that is that if you don't have someone that you can go to and give you perspective, then it's quite possible you're going to get kind of lost in this fog of what services, where should I niche down, should I do this acquisition, right? So it's going to help you with all of those logical kind of conclusions that you make. But for me, there was a moment where I was a full-service creative agency, and I prided myself on that. I think my tagline at the time was like, we are the Google of marketing services, or we're the Google of creative services. And then I read a book called Win Without Pitching by Blair Enns. It's an incredible book. I suggest everyone read it. But the main thesis is that if you don't become known as a subject matter expert in a very specific field, you will always be competing on price because you're undifferentiated from any other business or agency out there. So this was a big aha moment for me because we were serving every type of client, e-commerce, B2C, manufacturing clients, small business clients, higher ed clients. And I read this book, and I took the big risk to niche down and focus, at least positioning the agency as a higher education marketing agency. And in that moment, the business was actually able to start winning without pitching, hence the book's title. So just to recap, the two big things I would share with you in my journey is, it took me like 9 years, 10 years to get to 1 million. And if I had just reached out for help to these different organizations earlier, that would have accelerated my growth. The second thing is, if you don't have that peer network and you don't have key decision makers or advisors around you to help shape and scope kind of your service offerings and your price points, it's always best to niche down, because once I was able to niche down, I was able to win more contracts and speak more directly, again, to the empathy and the human of who my prospect was.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Ian. I think that's a good place to end this. So, do you have any final thoughts or advice for our audience?
Final thoughts and advice. Stay in school. Don't do drugs. Let's see. Those are obvious. Let's see. Final thoughts. I really do believe, and just going back, I'll leave you with this. I think there's two types of people. There's a type of person who knows what's right for them, knows what they need to do. In my case, it was education. I knew I needed to go and assert myself as an A++ student, 4.0, get the full ride. And those people who know what they need to do, some of them don't take action. And then the other type of person that's out there is the person that knows what they need to do and they're disciplined enough to take action. So my advice to the listeners is, decide what type of person you are. And if you're the type of person who has the big ideas, knows what to do, but you don't want to take action, That doesn't mean you can't be an entrepreneur. It just means that you're probably going to need to find an operator. And if you're the type of person that knows where to go and is disciplined enough to take the action, then it's probably a good bet that you could be the operator and the visionary. So for an early startup entrepreneur, my advice to them, the key takeaway here, decide what type of person you are. Are you more the visionary or are you more the operator? And if you feel like you have good discipline and you can get tasks done and you're detail oriented and all you need is a plan, then I would encourage you to go and find that visionary. So maybe a co-founder that really thinks big. And if you're more of the visionary type, make sure, do yourself a favor, because I'm the visionary type, do yourself a favor and try to find that early operator that could come in and help you build your business. So I'll leave you with that. I really do appreciate this time, Anishka. I think it's great that you're helping entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs. I know you're a bit of an entrepreneur yourself, so it's an honor to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ian, for sharing your time and insights. I've learned a lot, so thank you.
Awesome. Anytime. I'm available. People can hit me up. No one ever takes me up on this. But if you want, send a message to ian@unincorporated.com. That's IAN@unincorporated.com. Or you can find me on the internet anywhere at Ian Evenstar. I'm a public figure. Just kidding. So you can hit me up. I love to talk about this stuff. I could talk about this and mentor and give feedback all day long, whether it's technical, practical, big picture, or even just what I think the next step should be on anything. I'm that person who's willing to take that call. So please reach out if any of your listeners, including yourself, ever need that help.
Well, thank you so much, Ian.
You're welcome. Bye.